Chicka, could you tee us off with what is ego depletion and how are we seeing it show up in our workplaces?
This conversation started with a couple of buddies of mine last week when they were just talking about being pretty overwhelmed in their work, not just in the pandemic hangover, if you will, but just with the constant need to, or feeling that they needed to be moving forward. They needed to be looking at next week, looking at 2023 OKRs. This overwhelming sense of I can't almost work today because I'm worried about what's happening in 2 months from now. And so one of them brought to me this concept. And when you hear the words ego depletion, right, we understand what depleted is, like we're into our reserves, the battery life is way down. But when I did a bit more research around this word of ego, it's not the Freudian sense of ego, right? So it's not the psychology, Dr. Freud ego. It's more the Greek word of ego, which basically stands for self. So self-depletion. Self-depletion is another way of phrasing that, right? And so when you think of, and when I did a bit of research, the earlier research of the 90s with this came from a dude called Baumeister, who ended up writing a best-selling book called Willpower. Maybe we can throw that in the notes too, because he has definitely some interesting cuts. And this is where I want to talk about whether we agree or disagree with that. His original studies or research studies was putting people into a room with a bowl of radishes and a bowl of chocolate chip cookies. And he said, okay, so half of the group's going to go for the cookies, half of the group's going to be told to go for the radishes. And when they brought them out, what he found was because the people that were eating the radishes were more kind of intense on looking at the cookies, his hypothesis was they spent so much time thinking about the cookies while eating the radishes that they almost depleted their mental capacities. So if we come up 30,000 foot and we think about this as a you and me individual contributor, you and me working in the workspace, we spend all day making decisions. We spend all day talking about people, talking about processes, talking about systems. We get home and our partner, our spouse, our mom asks us to make a decision and we're like, what? Because we've depleted ourselves focused on the day of work, right? And so spilling that forward, the research now expands to say, when people that are ego depleted watch sad movies, they become extra sad or more sad. Not that sad is really quantifiable, but more sad than the regular person would be watching that scene, right? That they're not as happy in relationships that they're really close with. And it all stems from this idea of the frontal cortex, or as he would state, Baumeister, the interior single cortex, right? It slows down. And so it almost can't power up as quick. And so therefore, when I'm speaking to my daughters, I'm wondering if they're so ego depleted that sometimes when they turn up to the exam, they've been stressing about all this other stuff, that they can't give their best in the exam because their frontal cortex is not awake. So let me pause there. Thoughts, reactions. I could go both ways with this in discussion.
Well, with a name like Boundmaster, you definitely have gotten my interest of checking out the book and the research. But I think that the moment you started to describe it, I instantly went to Life After 5 at my house, which recently, well, because of the pandemic, has turned into a lot of not so much what are we going to make for dinner, but what are we going to order from from DoorDash, because it usually becomes the same thing that we order over and over, because the idea of making a decision about what to eat is just like, I don't care as long as it's edible and enjoyable. But to have to make that in a sea of choices is very ego depleting. So I can see that after 5. And I'll let Summer share some thoughts, but I could see some stuff manifesting in the.
Respond to that. Mm-hmm.
Siri wants to join. Siri wants to join the conversation. Go ahead, Summer.
Yes, Chicka, really fascinating, and as Joey mentioned, as you were talking about it, there was definitely a couple of scenarios that popped into my mind where I can quickly make the connection of, oh yes, I've seen that, but then I also started to think about. I don't want to get too far ahead in our conversation, but I also started to think about, oh my gosh, recognizing this in the workplace and trying to see like, okay, well, how do we even begin to remedy this fatigue so that our team members can have a little more energy or a little more of that battery when they get home. But, it makes me think about if you've ever had a group of friends or maybe a partner who literally would not make any decisions. Hey, what do you want to do today? Or, hey, what would you like to eat? And it's always like, well, whatever, just pick, and if you, on the other side, if you're like, oh my gosh, like I literally have no energy to pick anything else at this point, like, please just pick, whatever you pick is fine. I think that we do see that. And an example that I think is kind of related to Joey's is at the end of the day, just being, just so tired that, the choice of, well, I was going to make a salad and I was going to cook a home cooked meal and maybe I was going to go for a walk, quickly goes out the door because the easiest choice is like, kind of a poor choice, sit on the couch, like just, eat something that's unhealthy or order.
It's really interesting, and I think that it's even bigger than just meal choices here too. This whole idea of willpower is not self-discipline. I don't want to walk down that route. I think that's another podcast for another time too. But if you think about your frontal lobe, your cortex being hijacked, all of the things that you want to do, you suddenly can't be bothered because you're just so tired or you're so depleted, right? So you think going to the gym, you think about saving for Christmas, you think about saving for the holiday, whatever it is. And the research that I found too really speaks to, and gosh, add on the last 2 years, 3 years that we've dealt with. I mean, it's big time now. We're seeing a lot more undisciplined actions because people are now in this like, oh, we can breathe, quick, go, spend, right? Or do. And then when you back that up too, you get home from a full day of work making all of these decisions. And what do we as humans love to do? We medicate, right? And so we medicate through whichever way you medicate, whether it's binge watching the next Netflix show, whether it's grabbing a bottle of wine, whether it's sleeping right through because you're just too tired to get, whatever it is. It's quite interesting.
All of the above at once.
On one weekend, right? So I'm just always very curious to see this play out, because even this morning, just this very morning, I had an example of something happen at work in an after hours event turn up where I'm like, there it is. I could exactly tie that back to, I know what led him to do that because of everything that he had to deal with during the day.
Yeah. So that's a great transition, Chicka, because I want to paint even a picture for those who are tuned in that are managers or lead people at work. And one thing I talk about with our team, because we're improving our systems and processes, is the amount of friction that we as people, I say that collectively as individuals who work at a place of employment, experience in our day. And one of the things that I shared with our team is that it's an ideal state for our organization is where the challenge is the intellectual challenge, not the challenge of where to find this document or how do I create this thing from scratch or how do I make a decision when my boss kind of told me what to do, but not really. And so if you're tuned into this conversation and think that ego depletion is only about picking Netflix shows or ordering, food at the end of the day or wine. No, it's a series of decisions that we have to make at work. And so the picture I wanted to just paint of how to tackle ego depletion is thinking in a given day, what are the choices that people have to make autonomously, and how many of those choices can be either eliminated because they're non-essential to a day's function, or if there's some system or process or automation that can be created where instead of having to go fetch something, they can pull up a automated series of events or utilize some software that will make the job have less friction. Because I did a talk one time. And I said, I don't want my job to be the reason why my kid doesn't go to Harvard. And it was kind of tongue in cheek, but really it's thinking about like the way that decisions and work stress like makes us tired, makes us angry, makes us not show up in other spaces where we need to show up. So if my job is killing me and the decisions that I have to make, and I'm a poor parent or a poor partner to my spouse, then like that has ripple effects. So I'm not trying to scare the manager to say like get it right so that your employees' kids can go off to like great institution, But it's like, if you want to create a great experience, try to eliminate the friction in some of those decisions that may not have to be made, or you don't have to generate from scratch each time.
I love what you just said there, Joey, with the being intentional and thinking through with your direct reports. I've got several people that I manage, and what I've learned is I've started to move my one-to-ones at the start of the week for that particular reason, and then I have a quick casual wrap with them on Friday. But usually at the start of the week, it's like, all right, so set me what it is, and how can I be the blocker for you, or the what do you call it, the defensive, the offensive lineman for you to help you run down field quicker, right? And so I love that idea of being intentional and saying, what can we get out of the way here on Monday so that you have full autonomy to run and not worry about me coming back and pushing you back to Monday on Wednesday.
Yeah, Summer, you're in the thick of things with building out some of our processes. Maybe a question I might ask is, what are some of the tools that we're using, or tools that you're seeing used, that could help reduce friction at work? So maybe it's like the IRS, or HRIS system, or payroll, or whatever. I'll leave the floor open to you. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I would definitely say first and foremost, it would be leveraging technology. It's no secret that we can get more done with less friction when we utilize these systems, especially with so much artificial intelligence now able to like do many steps that we used to have to do on our own. So I think about the technology component as like really number one. And I would say, just aside from that, we talk so much, Joey, about training
Mhm.
for managers, all levels of leadership, and then employees. We also talk quite a bit about, the concept of focusing on like mental health and wellness. So I see this as like, I visualize it as a pie, right? That each piece of the pie alone is not going to truly fix the problem, but each piece of the pie that we are being intentional about and working on, not only for ourselves, but for our teammates and our families, I think will help get us to a better place where if we do nothing, we will absolutely be in that depleted state, which clearly isn't a good place for anybody to be in.
That's good for Uber Eats, but not for our work environments. Chica, man, we're like already out the gate with like great stuff. But to wrap this segment up, my question I want to say is, what can we do as individuals and people leaders to better support one another to help prevent ego depletion? Do you have any parting thoughts on that one?
Yeah. So I was just thinking, man, I need a vacation. But have you recently come back from vacations and said, now that I've had the vacation, I'm actually a little bit more stressed? And I think that that's actually adding to this depleted state, right? We think we're getting away, but going away is actually more stressful than doing this. So for me, I think, to answer your question there, Joey, it's really taking time in my calendar and being intentional again about when I can focus. To, if you remember the old business phrase, eat the frog, right? Do what's important at the start of the day or during that chunk of the day with no other distractions. Turn off your Slack, turn down the the volume and or airplane mode on your phone, so you can just hone in and get done what you need to get done. And then the second part to that, what I've learned in the last 6 months is, if you've got higher up management that often comes to you with certain baseline behaviors, be intentional about knowing when that's, or be anticipatory as when that's going to happen. Because if you know that at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, typically your boss comes down the hallway virtually, knocks on your door, like, have the other stuff done so that you can be ready to be present with them too. So I think at the end of the day, it's truly being present with yourself, and as well being just eyes up and ears up about what you know is about to come down the hallway for you.